There is a place on this earth that evolution forgot about. Or maybe evolution found it, looked at it, and decided to treat it as its own private laboratory. For 88 million years, while continents crashed into each other, while ice ages came and went, while entire species rose and vanished, this one place was left completely alone. And in that silence, in that isolation, in that 88 million year experiment running with no interference, no interruption, and no outside influence, life went absolutely wild. We're talking about an island where more than 90% of the animals you'll encounter in Tsingy or Tsingy exist nowhere else on the planet. Not in Africa, not in Asia, not anywhere. An island where trees grow, as if someone forgot to tell them which direction was UP. Where primates dance sideways across open ground, like they're performing for an audience only they can see. Where a single predator, looking like nothing you've ever classified before, rules an entire ecosystem it didn't share with anyone else for tens of millions of years. This is not a travel video. It's easy to wind to know. This is the story of the most biologically extraordinary place on the surface of the earth. This is chameleons. This is Madagascar, and by the time this is over, you will understand why no other island in human history has ever produced anything like it. To understand Madagascar, you have to go back. Not decades, not centuries, not even millions of years. You have to go back 88 million years. The world looked nothing like it does today. The continents were still arranging themselves. Dinosaurs were the dominant life form on land. The oceans were warmer, shallower, and covered in creatures that no longer exist. And the landmass we now call Africa was larger. Attached to its eastern edge was a massive section of ancient rock. Scientists today call it the Madagascar microcontinent. It had been part of Africa for hundreds of millions of years, formed together, shaped together, connected. And then, slowly, over millions of years, it broke free. The tectonic forces pulling it southward were irresistible. The rock cracked. The gap widened. Seawater poured in to fill the space. And what had been a piece of Africa became something else entirely. An island. At first, it carried with it the life that had been living on it when the separation began. Ancient species, ancient plants, ancient ecosystems, all of them now passengers on a piece of land that was slowly sailing away from everything it had ever been connected to. And then the isolation began. For 88 million years, Madagascar sat alone in the Indian Ocean. No land bridges connecting it to anywhere. No corridors for animals to migrate in or out. Whatever was on it when the separation happened, stayed. And whatever wasn't on it could only arrive by crossing hundreds of miles of open ocean, which, for most large animals, was impossible. The result was an island that developed its own biology, its own rules, its own version of what life is supposed to look like. By the time human beings first set foot on Madagascar, roughly 2,000 years ago, what they found was a world so strange, so unlike anything they had ever seen, that early accounts of the island were dismissed by European scholars as fantasy. They weren't fantasy. They were just Madagascar. If you drive along a particular road in western Madagascar, as the sun begins to set, you will see something that will stop you completely. Rising from the flat red earth, on both sides of the road, are enormous trees. Their trunks swollen and massive at the base, tapering slightly upward, stretching toward the sky, in smooth gray columns that look almost architectural. And at the very top, sparse branches spread outward, like the roots of something, planted upside down. They look like the earth itself, GREW hands, and reached upward. These are baobabs. And on this road, the Avenue of the Baobabs, they stand in loose formation, ancient and unhurried, as if they've been waiting centuries for someone to finally notice them. Which, in a sense, they have. The baobab trees of Madagascar are among the oldest living things on this island. Some of them have been standing for over 1,000 years. They were here before the kingdoms that rose and fell across this land, before the first towns were built, before roads existed. They hold time inside them, the way they hold water, quietly and in enormous quantities. A single large baobab trunk can store up to 32,000 liters of water. That's enough to fill a standard backyard swimming pool. In the dry months, when rain disappears from western Madagascar for weeks at a stretch, this stored water becomes the difference between life and death, for the tree and for the animals that depend on it. But the story of the baobabs on this road carries a weight that goes beyond biology. This avenue, these trees standing in open ground, with space between them and red earth at their roots, this is not what a natural baobab habitat looks like. What you're seeing is the aftermath of something that was lost. For millions of years, these baobabs stood inside a dense tropical forest that covered this entire region of western Madagascar. A canopy above them, undergrowth below, a complete ecosystem built around and between them. Then humans arrived. In less than 2,000 years, a blink of time in Madagascar's 88 million year story, most of that forest was cleared, burned for farmland, cut for timber, converted. The baobabs survived because the first people to settle here recognized something in them, something sacred, something too old and too significant to simply cut down. So the forest disappeared, and the baobabs remained. Standing in open ground now, exposed, their neighbors gone, their ecosystem collapsed around them. What you see on the Avenue of the Baobabs is not a triumph of nature. It is what survived a tragedy. And yet, there is something about standing among them that feels less like sadness and more like reverence. These trees were here before almost everything you know existed. They will be here, if we let them, long after everything you know has changed. They have seen more of this island's story than anything else alive. They remember what this land used to be. Move north from the baobab country, and the landscape transforms into something your brain initially refuses to process. The red earth disappears. The flat open ground vanishes. And rising from the surface of Madagascar, in formations that stretch for miles in every direction, are spires of limestone, so sharp, so densely packed, and so tall that the only word that fits them is this: the earth grew teeth. This is Tsingy de Bemaraha Iskoi, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the most geologically dramatic landscapes anywhere on the planet. The limestone formations, called Tsingy, a Malagasy word meaning roughly where one cannot walk barefoot, were created over millions of years by a specific combination of forces. Rainwater, slightly acidic as all rainwater is, fell on exposed limestone and dissolved it slowly over time, not evenly, selectively, following the natural fracture lines in the rock, carving channels and corridors, and eventually leaving behind a forest of stone, thousands of razor-edged pinnacles rising up to 70 meters high, their tips sharp enough to slice through skin with a careless touch. From above, it looks like the ground cracked open and revealed something violent underneath. From the ground, standing at the edge of the Tsingy, looking out across an endless maze of stone blades, stretching to the horizon, you feel something close to awe and something close to fear, simultaneously. There are no paths through the Tsingy, not natural ones. The only way humans have found to cross this landscape is overhead. Rope bridges, strung between pinnacles, swaying gently above a surface that would be lethal to fall onto. For generations, the people living near the Tsingy avoided it entirely. It was considered haunted, a place for spirits, not for the living. That reputation makes complete scientific sense. Because in the darkness between the stone pinnacles, in the caves and corridors, carved by millions of years of water, life found ways to exist that are found nowhere else on Earth. Specific lemur species have adapted to navigate the Tsingy, leaping between pinnacles, with precision that seems impossible until you've watched it happen. Specific reptiles have evolved coloring that matches the gray limestone exactly. Specific plants have pushed roots into cracks in the stone and built entire lives in places that receive almost no soil, almost no water, and almost no sunlight. The Tsingy didn't stop life. It redirected it. It pushed life into forms that nothing else on Earth required. And what emerged from that pressure is Madagascar's. Only Madagascar's. If Madagascar has a symbol, a single creature that represents everything the island is, like, it is the lemur. Not because lemurs are the most dangerous animal here, not because they're the largest, or the rarest, or the most scientifically significant, but because when you watch a lemur, really watch one, closely, for more than a few moments, something happens. You recognize something. Not the way you recognize a cat or a dog, not the familiarity of an animal shaped by thousands of years of human contact. Something older than that. Something deeper. You're looking at a primate, a member of the same broad family that eventually produced monkeys, apes, and humans, that has been separated from your own evolutionary line for 60 million years. 60 million years of going its own way, solving its own problems, developing its own social structures, its own communication, its own relationship with this island. And still, when it turns and looks at you, there is something behind the eyes that feels, somehow, like looking at a distant relative you've never met. Because that's exactly what it is. The ring-tailed lemur is perhaps the most recognizable. Its striped tail, banded in black and white like a flag, is longer than its body. Groups of them move together through the forest with a social complexity that researchers have spent careers trying to fully understand. They sunbathe in the mornings, sitting upright with their arms spread wide, faces turned toward the warmth, a behavior so human in its appearance that the first European scientists to observe it struggled to write about it without using the word meditative. The sifaka lemur moves differently than almost any primate on Earth. Its legs are built for vertical leaping, for launching between tree trunks with explosive power and landing with perfect grip. But when a sifaka needs to cross open ground, its leg anatomy makes normal walking nearly impossible. So it doesn't walk. It bounces, sideways, arms held out for balance, body turned at an angle to its direction of travel, hopping across the ground in a motion that looks choreographed, like something practicing for a performance. It is one of the most purely joyful things you will ever see an animal do. And then there is the eye. If the sifaka is joy, the eye is something else entirely. It emerges at night. Its eyes are enormous, wide and reflective, designed to gather every photon of available light in the darkness. Its ears are large and mobile, rotating independently to catch sounds. And its middle finger, elongated far beyond the others, skeletal, and slightly unnerving to look at, taps against tree bark in a rapid, repetitive rhythm. The eye is hunting with sound. It taps the bark and listens to the echo. A hollow sound means a tunnel beneath the surface, and a tunnel means the grub that created it. When it finds the right spot, the eye gnaws through the bark with teeth strong enough to open coconuts, then inserts that impossibly long finger into the tunnel and hooks out its meal. This is called percussive foraging. It's a technique that evolved independently on Madagascar, found in no other primate anywhere on Earth. But the lemur story carries grief alongside its wonder. Madagascar once had giant lemurs, species the size of gorillas, massive, slow-moving animals that dominated the highland forests of this island for millions of years. They are gone now. Within 1,000 years of the first humans arriving on Madagascar, every giant lemur species had vanished, hunted, habitat destroyed, eliminated. We know they existed only from bones, and from the ghost of their absence, the oversized fruits that still grow on some Madagascar trees, fruits that evolved to be swallowed whole by animals large enough to swallow them and now fall to the ground, with no one left to eat them. The island remembers what it lost, even when nothing else does. Madagascar has one more evolutionary achievement that deserves its own moment of silence, and that's eagles. Half of all chameleon species on Earth live on this island. Not a quarter, not a third, half. In a world with roughly 200 known chameleon species, approximately 100 of them evolved on one island, That makes up 0.4% of Earth's total land area. That number doesn't make logical sense until you understand what Madagascar's isolation actually did to evolution. It didn't just preserve species, it accelerated diversification, with no outside influences arriving to compete or interbreed. Animals on Madagascar split into new species faster, became more specialized, pushed further into ecological niches than animals on continents with open genetic exchange ever could. The result for chameleons was an explosion of variety. The Parsons chameleon, the largest chameleon species on Earth, can grow to the length of your arm. It moves through the forest canopy with a slow, deliberate patience that makes it look like the forest itself is moving. Its eyes, each one capable of moving completely independently, scanning a full 360 degrees simultaneously, track everything in its environment at once, with no blind spots, no gaps. When it strikes, the tongue fires out at a speed faster than the human eye can track, not just fast, accelerating faster than a fighter jet, hitting a target with adhesive precision, and retracting before the brain has fully registered it happened. At the other extreme, the Brachycia micra, one of the smallest reptiles ever documented. Adults can sit comfortably on the head of a match their entire lives, hunting, breeding, surviving, happen in a world measured in millimeters. Two chameleons. Same island. One the size of your arm. One the size of your fingernail. That is what 88 million years of isolation, running without interruption, produces. Every ecosystem needs a predator at its top. Something that regulates, something that keeps the balance, something that reminds every other living thing that survival is never guaranteed. In Africa, it's lions, leopards, wild dogs. In South America, it's jaguars, pumas, anacondas. In Madagascar, which had none of those and never would, evolution built its own answer. The fossa. At first glance, you'd be forgiven for not knowing what you're looking at. It has the body length of a large cat, the face of something between a mongoose and a puma, the climbing ability of a primate, a tail as long as its body, used for balance in the canopy, where it does much of its hunting. It belongs to its own family, not a cat, not a dog, not a mongoose, despite the superficial resemblance. The fossa is the product of a carnivore ancestor that arrived in Madagascar tens of millions of years ago and, in isolation, became something entirely new. It is the apex predator of an island that never had big cats. And so it became, through millions of years of pressure and adaptation, precisely what this island's ecosystem required. The fossa hunts lemurs through the forest canopy with a skill and efficiency that seems almost unfair. It can match a sifaka, leap for leap, through the trees. It hunts on the ground and overhead with equal comfort. It is silent, patient, and almost never seen by human observers, even when it is close. Researchers studying fossas in the wild describe the experience of tracking one as consistently humbling. You can follow the signs of its presence, tracks, scent markings, the sudden silence of the forest when one is near, without ever actually seeing it. The fossa is Madagascar's shadow, its invisible rule. The reason that, even in a paradise built over 88 million years, survival still has conditions. The fossa hunts lemurs through the forest canopy with a skill and efficiency that seems almost unfair. It can match a sifaka, leap for leap, through the trees. It hunts on the ground and overhead with equal comfort. It is silent, patient, and almost never seen by human observers, even when it is close. Researchers studying fossas in the wild describe the experience of tracking one as consistently humbling. You can follow the signs of its presence: tracks, scent markings, the sudden silence of the forest when one is near, without ever actually seeing it. The fossa is Madagascar's shadow, its invisible rule. The reason that, even in a paradise built over 88 million years, survival still has conditions. The first settlers came from Southeast Asia, thousands of miles across open ocean, in outrigger canoes. Later, waves of migration brought people from the African mainland. The result was a Malagasy people and culture unlike any other in the world. A fusion of Asian and African ancestry, language rooted in the Malay family, traditions shaped by both the island and the distant places its people had come from. They found an island, unlike any than their ancestors had ever described to them. They found the giant lemurs, the baobab forests, the Tsingy, the chameleons, the fossas watching from the trees. And they named all of it, built relationships with all of it, created a culture in which the land and the ancestors who had walked it were inseparable, where the spirits of the dead remained connected to the places where they had lived, and where treating the natural world carelessly was understood as a moral failure, not just a practical one. But the arrival of humans also began the unraveling. The giant lemurs disappeared. The lowland forests shrank. The rivers ran red with eroded topsoil from cleared hillsides, a phenomenon so visible from space that NASA scientists studying satellite images of Madagascar decades ago described the red sediment flowing into the ocean as the island bleeding. Today, Madagascar is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, and simultaneously, one of the most environmentally threatened. More than 90% of its original forest cover has been lost. Species are disappearing before they've been fully documented. The same isolation that made Madagascar extraordinary is now a liability. Animals evolved for one specific environment, have nowhere else to go when that environment disappears. The story of Madagascar is not a simple one. It is not purely a story of wonder. It is not purely a story of loss. It is a story that is still being written by the people who live on this island, by the scientists who study it, by the governments and organizations working to protect what remains, and by the 30 million Malagasy people navigating the impossible tension between survival today and preservation for tomorrow. 88 million years is number chanchotridros. That is how long Madagascar was alone. 88 million years of evolution, running without interruption, without outside influence, without reset. The result was not just strange animals or unusual plants. The result was proof of something profound about the nature of life itself. Given enough time, and enough space, life will find solutions that nothing else could have predicted. It will fill every available role, solve every available problem, push into every available niche with a creativity that has no limit and no blueprint. Madagascar is not an accident. It is what happens when you give life 88 million years and tell it, figure it out. And life, in the form of dancing lemurs and ancient baobabs and color-shifting chameleons and ghost predators and razor-stone forests and sacred trees that outlasted entire civilizations, figured it out. The result was not just strange animals or unusual plants. The result was proof of something profound about the nature of life itself. Given enough time and enough space, life will find solutions that nothing else could have predicted. It will fill every available role, solve every available problem, push into every available niche with a creativity that has no limit and no blueprint. Madagascar is not an accident. It is what happens when you give life 88 million years and tell it, figure it out. And life, in the form of dancing lemurs and ancient baobabs and color-shifting chameleons and ghost predators and razor-stone forests and sacred trees that outlasted entire civilizations, figured it out. If this video moved you, if it made you feel something for this island and everything it carries, please subscribe. Every video on this channel is built to take you deep into the places that matter most, not just to see them, but to understand them. Leave a comment below. Tell me, what part of Madagascar's story hit you the hardest? I'll see you in the next one.